Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming and for joining us for this very important conversation. I don't think I need to introduce Gabby to anybody in this room, but for the sake of formality, Congresswoman Giffords is just an amazing woman. She is from Tucson, Arizona, was the first woman ever elected to the Arizona State Senate, became a congresswoman, served her country honorably in the United States Congress until that tragic day that she was with her constituents and was shot. And since then, after spending months in the hospital, intensive care, rehab, she has somehow found the resilience, hope, strength, courage to fight the good fight to keep everybody safer from gun violence. I don't know about you, but I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I think most people would have been overcome by the pain, the suffering, the anger. But she's one amazing, amazing woman. And in our little situation here, as Gabby and I were just talking, the people around this table, we have been trying for years to get some common sense legislation around gun safety passed in the legislature. Year after year after year, we try and we don't quite get it over the finish line. And in our tiny way, we get frustrated. She's going to fire us up because she keeps going. 50% of her time on the road, traveling from here back to Arizona, was in Virginia yesterday. Keep us going because we got to continue to fight the fight to save lives. And for me, it's just an unbelievable honor. Unbelievable honor. So if you want to offer a few comments, and then I'll let folks introduce themselves.
Stopping gun violence takes courage. The courage to do what's right. The courage to do ideas. I've seen great courage win my life from the line. Now is the time to come together, be responsible. Democrat, Republican, everyone. We must never stop fighting. Fight, fight, fight. Be bold. Be courageous. The nation's counting on you. Thank you very much.
I want to get to the discussion, but I think it would be helpful for the Congresswoman to have a sense of who's here, so maybe, very brief introductions from each of you, starting with Tom.
Well, ma'am, welcome to Rhode Island again.
Twice, three times.
I'm Colonel James Mandy, the Superintendent of Rhode Island State Police and the Director of Public Safety for Rhode Island.
Thank you very much.
And he co-chaired a task force on gun safety for me a few years ago, did a phenomenal job, and came forth with many recommendations that we're acting on.
Well,
Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us. We're really honored to be with you today. My name is Jordan Seabury. I serve at the Nonviolence Institute here in Providence as the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy, working primarily on community level violence.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome. So happy to have you here. It's really exciting and an honor to meet you. I'm Sydney Monstrom-Klaas. I'm the board chair of Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence and one of the founding members of that organization.
Good afternoon. I'm humbled and honored to have you here today. Thank you for coming. My name is Diana Garlington, and I'm a survivor.
My daughter Nicole Hockley says hello, and I should be giving a hug from you. And I thought we were going to have a moment to tell our story. Is that still an option, or do you want me to just...
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really would love the opportunity to speak for a group of people that are usually forgotten. And I want to say some names. Columbine, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, Parkland. Aside from the obvious, the thing they had in common is they were all young people. And that doesn't mean that I am dishonoring any of the other young people, but these people were young enough that they had living grandparents, most of them. I am one of the living grandparents. My grandson, Dylan, was killed at Sandy Hook. He was 6. My husband and I were horrified because we should have been the next ones to go. But, like any good grandparent, we decided that if the opportunity was ever available, we would have traded in a second. Dylan was killed 12/14/12. His mother's birthday was 12/18/12. Now, Nicole was my only child, so her birthday was always an enormous celebration. Not since that year, because on 12/18 was the day that we went to the funeral home and saw Dylan in his casket. And I will never forget the cry from my daughter, because that was the first time she had seen her son since she put him on the bus to go to school. I'm here for the forgotten victims, the grandparents, because the grandparents have a double loss. They lose a grandchild, and they also have the inability to do anything to help this horrific time disappear from their child's life. We're parents. We're supposed to make the world better for our children. We're supposed to make the ugliness go away. It's over 7 years. I haven't found a way to take the pain away from my daughter. And I have 2 holes in my heart. One, for the loss of my precious Dylan, and the second, for the loss of my daughter that went with him that day. Don't ever forget the forgotten victims, the grandparents. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Of course.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't know it was Gerald. Thank you for coming. It's an honor. My name is Erica. I am a survivor of the Rhode Island shooting. Okay.
Thank you. Giovanna.
Good afternoon, my name is Giovanna Rodriguez. It's such an honor to be in your presence. I'm a survivor of domestic and gun violence.
Good afternoon, it is an honor to be here, and I'm very happy to be here. My name is Myra Latimer, and I am a survivor. My son Stephen Latimer was killed in October in 2011 in a random act of gun violence, just 2 days before his 24th birthday. And listening to you, I never really thought about it. My mom was devastated that there was nothing she could do for me, but I don't think about it because we're so in our own pain. So I appreciate you saying that.
Hi, I'm Reverend Liz Linder-McFly. I'm the founder of the Guns to Plowshares Clergy Coalition here in Rhode Island. And like everybody else, I am humbled and really, really grateful to have you here and for all your work.
Good afternoon, Congresswoman. My name is Wasa Bagayoko, and I'm a founding member of Thoughts, Prayers, Action, a Brown University-based independent.
And I'm the Attorney General. It's great to see you.
So I'll just open this up with a broad question, and that anyone can, of course, jump in. We have a number of folks around the table who are themselves victims of gun violence or family members. What do you think we need to do? You have a number of legislators here today. You have a preeminent leader. What do we need to do here in Rhode Island?
You posed the question on the readout to me, what can we do to reverse this? I don't think we can reverse it until we have strengthened gun laws. I know great strides have been made, and that's wonderful, but I'm wired now. But when a woman in Connecticut can buy an AR-15 because she wants to, and let me tell you, Sandy Hook is not Islamabad, and there's no Islamabad in the state of Rhode Island either. So I think until we do something to strengthen those laws to outlaw, and I would love to see this everywhere, I'd love to see it in Rhode Island, that any type of AR-15 gun could not be privately purchased. These are the guns that we give to the people we send out in harm's way. Those men and women need them. Gun enthusiasts using the Second Amendment as a justification to have one, that's just not enough in my book. I remember the day of, and I hate to keep bringing this up, but the day that we went to see Dylan, and they were wonderful at the funeral home. You know what they said to us? Don't touch this part of him and don't touch that part of him. And you know what that means? They had to put him back together. Big bullets. And we were fortunate, if I could use that word, that he looked like Dylan. Some families were not that fortunate. So I am so against AR-15s, you wouldn't believe it. So I think we have to strengthen the laws. Yeah, I'm surrounded here.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I think from our perspective, we need the laws to be strengthened. We need stronger gun control. We certainly agree on that. I think one of the best ways to accomplish that is to prioritize the stories of folks who are most directly impacted. I'm very happy to see a lot of those folks. I'm happy to call colleagues and friends at this table. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also comment on the fact, I think the Colonel in general will agree with me, that this is an issue where I've been so humbled and honored to see the leadership of women in our communities really take priority and really come forward on this issue. I'm really grateful to be at this table, in particular, given that makeup. Violence moves in pretty recognizable patterns. A person who is victimized is usually about 50% more likely to be re-victimized within those next 5 years. For the young folks that we work with, a young person who has been shot or shot at or witnessed a shooting, the probability doubles that that young person will commit an act of violence within the next 2 years. And so those patterns are clear, and we've been lucky that groups like Giffords have really taken leadership on demonstrating what those best practices are. And I think there are 3 that we have incorporated at the Nonviolence Institute and put into practice on the ground here, including focused deterrence, really zoning in on the folks who are most violence involved, hospital intervention, where we partner with Lifespan to make sure that we're reaching victims in the immediate, and then street outreach, where we're able to build relationships with the folks who are most involved. But all of those require the stories of folks most directly impacted, and I'm really humbled to be here with those folks today.
I'm the mother of a 21-year-old daughter who I lost to gun violence. I would have to agree with everyone who's here. We do need tougher gun laws. We do need to strengthen our laws. I have a big issue with the fact that we have so many unsolved murders here in Rhode Island. We're such a small state, but I just feel like there are just too many that are sitting behind and sort of, left as numbers. And I don't want my daughter to be remembered as a number. I want her to be remembered as essence. So I would have to say that that's what I would be looking for.
Yeah, I think we had this conversation about cold cases and the need to continue to work those cases. There are, at times, and we've seen this even on my short tenure, that the evidence just doesn't get us where we need to be. And I don't want to speak for Colonel Manny or Roberts McGee or the other places where those cases come up, but they remain active and we work them as actively as we can. But I understand the pain it leaves for families when they've lost a loved one and there's no justice, at least yet. No, it can be a difficult thing. There are times when the quantum of proof just doesn't get us to where we'd like to be, and that's a decision that we have to make as police or prosecutors, whether we have enough ethically and responsibly to go forward with the prosecution. But it's an issue that I've grappled with now for a long time.
Jim, picking up on the point about AR-15s, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the perspective from law enforcement. I know I've had discussions with troopers or municipal police officers who say to me, it's not fair for us because we don't carry those high-capacity magazines, and yet that's what's in the community. I don't know if you want to offer the perspective from your side.
So Governor, even before I answer that directly, just as a general statement, so this is the most complex issue I've really had with the county, because I'm on both sides of this. I'm a career law enforcement officer, 30-some years, carrying a firearm. I also shoot competitively, and I do believe in the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment's not going away. But anyone in this room that knows me knows I believe this. Common sense, responsible government. Protect the Second Amendment, protect people as well. And we here in law enforcement, the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association, representing here the Attorney General, we had a meeting as early as last week discussing this, what we need to do. We had a horrific tragedy about a month ago in Westwood, Rhode Island, where a very nice woman was murdered, and 2 other very nice women were shot, survived in a murder-suicide that we thought at first was an active shooter. And what we've determined in law enforcement and everywhere else, that there were loopholes in these gun laws that allowed this gentleman to buy a firearm. They should not. So we've been working close with the AG, with the Police Chiefs Association, and the General Assembly, representatives and senators that are here as well, trying to close the low-hanging fruit, the loopholes that we can fix very quickly. And that's the priority we have. And we're making some headway. The Senate passed a very important bill. Senator Coyne's here. We're going 3D weapons goes down, so we're taking a very methodical and achievable approach. One more thing. There's a huge distrust on both sides of the aisle. And I brought that testimony last week. So you have people that believe in firearms, and you have people that really want to restrict the firearms. And they just have so much distrust in each other, and it's a slippery slope theory that if you give in, you lose a yard. And that's the biggest thing we have to overcome, that we can't have common sense responsible gun laws while we have your rights in the Second Amendment. So don't answer your question. You and I talk about this at length. There's no one answer to if banning us assault weapons or banning high-capacity magazines, think could just solve this whole problem, gun violence and impassioned. I don't know if there's just one answer. The police do feel, up until a few years ago, we were grossly out that we were carrying defensive weapons and offensive weapons on the street. But now police are more well armed to present against it. More firearms, bigger firearms, is that going to solve the problem? So once again, I don't have one answer to all of this. We're working for an answer, and that's something we work diligently on. Thank you.
Governor, can I follow up on that a little bit? You know, one of the things that we've been talking about in law enforcement is this disconnect, I think, between public perception and the reality of what keeps a firearm out of the hands of someone who has a mental health issue. I think there's a perception that if someone is in mental health treatment or has a mental health issue, that there are ways that guns can be kept out of their hands for their own safety and the safety of others. The reality is that whether it's Rhode Island or federal law, the means by which you do that are very, very narrow. I think everyone around this table knows that. I'm not sure that the public does. And one of my concerns, and we talked about this last week, was that the public generally thinks that if you have a mental health issue, you can't get a firearm. We know that's not true. You either have to be adjudicated as being having a significant mental health issue by a court, or you have to have been institutionalized against your will. That's federal standard, and that's essentially the state standard. And we ought to at least come to grips with that reality. I think we should do something about it. But we ought to at least recognize that. There's lots of aspects to this. But the one common theme that I've seen over 20 years in law enforcement, federal and state, is mental health drives a lot of this. Certainly we need, I support all the measures that you and I introduced last year in this very room. But I think we really need to drill down on that mental health piece. And I think there are things we can do in Rhode Island to take additional steps to make sure that people who have legitimate mental health issues don't have firearms, and again, would endanger themselves or others.
Do you have a thought on that? Oh, the shooting. no guns, no shooting. A little later.
What do you think we should do here?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is to speak openly and honestly about what the limitations are in keeping firearms out of the hands of people with mental health issues. I don't think the public fully understands the scope of that problem. I think the public thinks that when a Rhode Island police chief runs a background check on somebody, that if they find a mental health issue, that they can keep the guns out of that person's hands, and that's not true. It's only if the court has adjudicated them as having a significant mental health issue, or if they've been institutionalized involuntarily. Those are the only two things, federally or on the state side, which will keep a firearm out of the hands of somebody who has a mental health issue. And I think people with mental health issues is a much greater cadre of people that just fits in that category. So I think we ought to think, the first thing we have to do is acknowledge it and recognize it. That is a major flaw in how we do gun safety. And then to the extent we, as legislators and advocates, can come up with a way to expand that group in a responsible way that also recognizes that we don't want to discourage people from getting mental health treatment, then I think that's something we should really tackle and think carefully about.
And also the public, sorry, go ahead.
The shooting, the Safeway store. Okay, Ron Barber, Safeway store. Laughter. Shooting. Yes. Crazy. I don't like it at all.
That's your. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think the public also isn't aware how much gun violence is actually focused on suicide. And that's not something that the public carries in its awareness enough. But when we're talking about mental health issues, we're not just talking about violence against others. One of the biggest issues is violence against self, which is actually one of the most important mental health intersections of mental health and gun violence, which doesn't get lifted up enough, I think, but it's a huge issue.
We agree. The task force did a great job looking at that. I'd say the same is true for domestic violence. It's, I agree with you, and I support your position on the AR-15 and Sandy Hook, and all the other mass shootings are incredible tragedies that I think we have the ability to limit, if not eliminate, with better laws. And there's no one silver bullet. That's why our package was 6 or 7 bills. Virginia has 8 bills up, and there's a lot to do. But in addition to suicide, a lot of this happens in homes, among, people who love one another or had, loved one another. If you want to offer your thoughts on that.
It's a huge issue, and kind of what keeps me motivated and gives me the strength to continue to tell my story. I think that the issue of domestic violence is sometimes overlooked, and I think it's having the conversations, getting survivors of not only domestic violence but of gun violence involved in conversations, because our stories matter. Our stories matter, and we also need to let victims of domestic violence know that there are safe ways to get out. Because for a long time I felt trapped. I felt like no one was listening. And I think that we, as a collective, need to do better in really informing the public of the help that is out there. But also take a quick look at a lot of these domestic violence abusers. We don't really give them some of these cases, the follow-up that they need. And sometimes, just going to her house and telling your story, you're not there with an attorney, or if you're not there with a court advocate, it's really difficult to be heard and listened to by these judges, which was what happened in my case. A lot of what I went through, along with my 2 children, could have been avoided. Our stories matter.
John, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but you're articulate, and for those of you who don't know Giovanna, I mean, I don't think we would have had success passing the bill we did a couple of years ago, but for your advocacy. But just to pull that on that thread a little bit, what would have mattered to get you the advocacy and the, help you needed to tell your story better?
At that time, stronger laws. And like I said, our judges need to listen to the victims. Our stories need to be believed. We need to be listened to. I was thankful that I had an attorney, but even with an attorney, it was difficult for me to get the restraining order to stick. A lot of what my children and I went through could have been avoided if that judge had just taken a little bit more time to really listen to what was being said, not sympathize because the other party had served in the military. I can't stress it enough, and I don't know how to verbally put that. It's just, our stories matter, and it just takes but a second to listen. It doesn't have to take, bringing a child into the judge's chambers. It doesn't have to go there. You're in a court of law. You have the authority to remove firearms from a home, to listen that, maybe he does need a mental health screening. And I think that that's, for me, in my opinion, and what happens to a lot of women and men and children. We are not heard in the manner that we should be heard.
Thank you. I think one of the things, building off that, one of the things that gets overlooked very often is just how tight Rhode Island communities are, which can actually, I think, present a challenge. We're the second most densely populated state in the country. And that, in a lot of cases I've seen, makes it easy for domestic abusers to evade no contact orders when everyone is, as closely connected. From our position, it makes community guns that much easier to pass around through gang memberships. And so it becomes really critical to be able to target and build relationships and really key in on the folks who are involved. That small 0.5% of folks who perpetrate the vast majority of violence, because stories like Giovanna's are so common because part of it, I think, is our communities are so interconnected, which is one of the best things about the state. It also can be one of the biggest challenges.
Do you really think? You see it?
I brought up that incident in Westerly a month ago. The guy had to respond there. The governor responded later on as well. It was terrible. Being in this line of work for 30-something years, that seems to be bad. I was on a SWAT team. I've seen a lot of domestic violence related murder, suicide. They're awful. That one is especially hard. But on a positive one, and I've been testifying about common sense gun laws for almost 30 years. I think we're on the right track. I think we're moving forward inch by inch. And it's been demonstrated this year, especially in the General Assembly, that we have great senators and reps that are sitting right here in the Senator Coyne. I keep pointing to her, but she's a state trooper with me for 20 years. She doesn't look like a state trooper. She's boss, and she's my boss. But so we are making it. There is a movement on both sides to get some of these more important items to the General Assembly. There's 3 bills that appear to be moving forward. One is to prevent these loopholes I'm talking about that happened in Westerly with regard to mental health that the Attorney General spoke about. One is ghost guns and 3D guns, which are ridiculous that they are around. And And so these are just a couple of the things we're working on. But I do feel, for the first time, I feel positive and moving to be able to move forward.
Yeah. So, do you have anything?
Well, the first thing is I did have to check on when I received the information that my question initially was, as a gun owner, what do I think of gun violence laws and bills? I'm not a gun owner. And then someone else said to me, and you're a sharpshooter. And I said, all right, let me clarify some things. I did grow up in a household with people who owned guns, my family members. Many of them do own guns. I grew up respecting guns and learning to shoot them and target shooting. And when I went to college, I entered a contest and I won, which came as a complete surprise. I thought, well, doesn't everybody know how to do this? And I was recruited on the spot into ROTC. They were there recruiting as people were leaving the building. And so, but for me, I grew up, and that was a pastime. It was a fun thing to do, and many of my family members still own guns, but I don't, and I never will, and there won't be one in my household for multiple reasons. But for me, things changed when my cousin was murdered, and he was killed in a domestic violence murder where his wife and her boyfriend premeditated this whole situation and shot him. And he was missing for a week. His two girls were young girls. And, as I hear people tell their stories, and I've told this story before, and every time you tell it, your heart just, you can't imagine just like the pain of this situation of such a sudden, violent death at the hand of a gun, and completely preventable. I also have a public health degree, so I've studied public health. I worked in HIV prevention for 15 years. Like, I know that laws change. Laws change our public health and public safety. We have laws that say HIV is reportable. We have laws that say wear your seatbelt, and it's illegal in every state but New Hampshire to not have a seatbelt on. And we know those laws work, and gun safety laws are the same. Looking at the Giffords website, which I use all the time, you see that states that have stronger gun laws not only have less gun deaths, they have less gun violence. We need to remember the gun violence, and many of us have been affected here by the violence as family survivors or as survivors yourselves. And crime is also lower in those states where they have stronger gun laws. So I look at that and I say, so doesn't this make sense? We're trying to save lives, save people, like many of you around this table, from suffering, from losing loved ones. So I am thrilled with Senator Coyne and this 3D gunman. And I know as the coalition in the campaign, what we're doing is really looking at the high-capacity magazine ban. And I feel like so many of the things that we're doing, like Colonel Manny, you're talking about this Westerly shooting and saying, okay, what are those loopholes we can close, which is wonderful. But I also, again, looking at the public health perspective, public health is proactive to say, okay, look at what happened in Newtown, look at what's happened in other places, even though they weren't in our state, they're very nearby, they can happen here, we all know that. And so, we shouldn't be waiting for those things to happen to react. We should be saying, we know these laws work. We know that gun violence, gun deaths, crime will decrease with this. What are we waiting for?
Absolutely. In fact, the day after Westerly, I called the colonel and my staff and said, what do we have to do? What changes would have prevented that? And to their great credit, and to Attorney General's help, they've come up with some excellent proposals. But I've also said, and this is a horrible thing to say, and I believe it to be true, God forbid if there were a Sandy Hook with an AR-15 in Providence tomorrow, the legislature would take action. So why do we have to wait for that to happen? We shouldn't have to.
I would love to speak to that if I could. I was thinking about what I could best say here, and I was thinking about a chapter in Ezekiel where, and it goes, shepherds, you are not taking care of your sheep. I wrote down my remarks because preachers go too long all the time, so glad this is my constraint on myself. But shepherds, you are not taking care of the sheep. And you profit by them, but you have abandoned them. And the sheep are being taken and torn by all the violence and selfishness of those who prey upon them. And I quoted that recently in my own church because it has always been true that leaders need to actively look out for their people. And I'm relating this now to the legislature, as you mentioned. Leaders need to actively look out for their people. And it is also, just as this is thousands of years old, it has also obviously been true, always, that leaders sometimes fail, sometimes willfully fail, to look out for their people. And then it is the charge of faith leaders, among others, to call them out and name this as a derogation of duty. And say, you have to be called back to your work. And all of the clergy who are part of the Guns to Plowshares project have done this work because it's making us crazy when people tweet out thoughts and prayers, which frankly is our job. Thoughts and prayers is our job. And we do our job fine. And we walk with people through the valley of the shadow of death. And it is not legislators' job to tweet out so easily and cheaply thoughts and prayers. It is legislators' work to actually pass legislation that I think will both support gun control and, frankly, fund work like the work that happens that Jordan is helping to lead, that actually diminishes gun violence and gives people different tools for living and resolving the issues that come up in their lives. We are really grateful for all the work and leadership you have shown in this area. And we are really frustrated because so many of our legislators have clearly abandoned their charge. And I have to say, this is not just my own congregation, Unitarian Universalist. It is Jewish congregations, Baptist congregations, Congregationalists, African Methodist Episcopal, Catholic. We have gotten great support from people across all lines, and not just clergy and congregations. Educators, teachers, high school, college students, youth, artists, and I hope, is it okay, can I ask, is it okay with the people who have suffered directly from gun violence if I show a piece of art that was made from a firearm as part of our efforts? Is that going to be okay with you? This is a handgun that was used to threaten a young woman. It was her own father who used it to intimidate her. And she donated it to our Guns to Plowshares efforts, where we are taking actual firearms that are donated by gun owners and users, many of whom have multiple firearms and are still gun owners and users, and they want common sense gun control legislation. So they gave us firearms that could be taken by the Providence Police Department, rendered impossible to use, not even a part of this could be used again, and then we gave them to artists who made them into gardening tools. We used this hand spade last year on the anniversary of Columbine to plant Columbine in our church garden. And there are a number of congregations that have one of these now, and more are on the way. But that's the coalition that we have. It's across the city, it's across the state, it's across denominations, and races, and ages, and ethnicities, and identities. Everybody thinks that the legislators need to stop paying as much attention to the NRA, and more attention to the majority of Rhode Islanders who want much stronger common sense gun control legislation now. And I just have to say, we are the flock, but we are not sheep. We are the flock, but we are not sheep, and we are not content with thoughts and prayers.
Thank you.
May I? Please. I would like to follow on something you said, which I have thought so many times. What if a Sandy Hook happened in East Greenwich or any other town? And I hope it never does. I would never wish that on anyone. But I kept thinking, if something happens to somebody in Washington, maybe they'll click. And I remember the baseball game where the, senator from Louisiana? And I thought, this is it. Something's going to happen. It's one of their own. Zip, nada, nothing. So I almost think, I don't know what could happen to pound some sense into them. I mean, that man was in tough shape. I can't even remember his name, and I should because my sister lives in Louisiana. But he was in tough shape, and they welcomed him back, and nobody's ever said, isn't that awful what happened to him? One of their own. Nobody did anything. That's national, so I'm not picking on the state. That was a national thing. But following what you said, I just thought this is it, and nothing.
Let's is why we continue, and that's why when I introduced the Congresswoman, I mean, just being here will help us raise awareness of the issue, but we need to draft off of your resilience and hope and courage, because Carl said it, some of this stuff is common sense. It's evidence-based. You said it too. Other states, if you look at states that have these common sense laws in place, have less gun violence. It is common sense, it's evidence-based, it's taking too long, but we're not going to give up here. And that's we're not going to give up. It shouldn't take this long, it shouldn't be this hard, but we're going to stick with it until we get done what we need to get done to keep Rhode Islanders safe. And I also think we have to keep studying. You know, the threats are changing, the technology is changing. As you say, we're now looking at ghost guns and 3D guns, and who knows what it will be next year. So we have to be vigilant too, and continue to update our response as the threat changes and what we're seeing changes. A few folks haven't had a chance to say anything, so I want to make sure you don't have to if you're uncomfortable, but
You know, I do want to say something, and absolutely no disrespect to anyone in this room. I totally agree with the gun laws and that we need stricter gun laws. And again, when there's mass shootings, everyone is in uproar. But when my son was murdered, and he wasn't doing anything wrong, even if he was, but he was not doing anything wrong, there was nothing. And so my question was, what do I think we need to do in Rhode Island and to change, prevent another mom from going through what I've gone through. And I don't necessarily think the gun laws are going to change that, because it does nothing for those young men and women who are on the street, who have guns that they shouldn't have, who are out here taking lives and don't care that they are. When my son was murdered, it was 2 days before he turned 24. He had a 5-year-old daughter. I'm raising her now. And I have to get up every single day and do what I have to do, because I want her to have a good life and for things to be okay for her. But it's a struggle. It's a struggle when we're out here. We want to make a difference. We want to make a difference in the lives of other kids, other families. I don't want to see another mother go through it. Diana's daughter was killed a month after my son was. I didn't know her, and I cried for her because I was still suffering. So I feel like when it's the kids in the inner city, that no one really cares. But they have parents, they have children, they have grandparents who love them, regardless of what they may be doing in their life. I have a foundation in my son's name. I did a 5K in his memory to give out scholarships to kids who've lost a parent or guardian to gun violence. And I've done that for the last 7 years. Last year I didn't do it. But that's important to me, and not just for keeping my son's memory alive, but for every other parent who might have lost somebody, the kids that are out there, because I want them to know, you know what, somebody does care about me. And the fact that when I've gone out to look for assistance financially or just to have people participate, people will turn their face up. And my son wasn't in a gang. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but people automatically think that because he's a black and brown child that he's done something wrong and he deserves it. I don't care. Nobody's child deserves to be murdered in any kind of way. So it's very frustrating, and it's hard to want to do this work when we are looked at as, well, you know what, it doesn't matter because it's happening to you, or it's happening in the city. It should always matter. I don't care what color you look like. Would it matter if Central High School got shut up? Would it be that big of an uproar? It needs to matter no matter what. Our kids need to know that they matter. You know, I was born in Providence. I grew up in Providence. And a lot of things that some of the mothers and other people I have met in my time since I lost my son, I didn't have to go through in my life, I guess. But at the same time, my pain for another mother, I don't care where you are, what you look like, will always remain the same, and it's not the same. And unfortunately, until it happens to somebody, they are not even going to understand or care, and I don't. So, thank you. Thank you.
Can I say one
We
more?
wanted you here because your kid matters. All kids of every color in every neighborhood matters. And I'm so happy you spoke out. I know it's hard, but it's an important message. And we'll do more. We will do more, and we're with you in all that you do and your strength. You can have the last one.
I wanted to say, and I know that everybody at this table will know it. Anytime there's a mass shooting, I go back to that day and relive that day. I'm sure anytime a young man is shot, you go back to that day. People talk about Las Vegas, you go back to that day. So there is no such thing as closure. This is an everyday pain that we carry, and that we get up every morning and take a step and breathe, to me, is phenomenal that we can do it. And there's so many women here. Yay.
Well, and please, yeah, and to go back to her, because I am a victim of a mass shooting, and I got so emotional when she was talking because I have a 6-year-old. So I know the feeling being in a mass shooting, and so I know what those kids went through and what they saw. I also know the feeling of a mom on the outside and feeling helpless. And one of the reasons why I wake up every day is because I did not want that guy to take my power. And it's very important for us to advocate for our young kids so they don't have to grow up. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, especially you for traveling and inspiring us. To the victims, thank you. You're incredible, you're strong, and you're right, every day that you get up, I don't know how you do it, but thank God you do, and thank God you're here and helping us, all of us together, continue to take the steps that are necessary so we address these issues. I agree with the Colonel, it's complex. Complex. Every one of you spoke to all the different pieces of it. And by the way, along what you're speaking to is additional to just the problem of guns. It's the problem of poverty and racism and injustice. And so we have a lot of work to do. So I feel that I'm on the right team if we're doing this together. I feel buoyed by your ideas and your passion and your determination. And I want you to know we do care. We're going to stay at it until we make Rhode Island a better, safer, more equitable place for everybody. And we are getting there. So as tough as it's been, try to summon optimism for what it can be. As a mother, my heart goes out to you guys so much. And I just want to thank you. I'm truly, truly grateful for your time and for your courage and for your willingness to engage. Every single one of you, and the legislators and everybody who is here, police chiefs, advocates, thank you guys for coming.